in this instance, do people like the Philippines say, I tell you what, we have been shut down, but we're going to play catch up here? Or do they say, well, actually, it kind of suits us well because it could be the beginning of driving the nickel price back up? And how do they react?
Typically, mines have some ability to crank it up a little bit, but in this case, a lot of those mines, are able to sort of, push at capacity as much as they're literally just digging up dirt. That's what that laterite ore exports look like. So, they sort of push to capacity already. And where they sometimes are able to sort of provide more supply is they may have lower grade stockpiles that they, don't ship because it doesn't meet a minimum cost. But because the Indonesian ore ban was pulled forward to January of this year, those Philippine ore stockpiles, basically any Philippine ore people could get their hands on, went into China already in the second half of last year. So, where it really, has an impact is, there's an X amount of production that's not there, that's going to reduce X amount of stockpiles, which is just going to tighten up, the supply demand supply demand balance and the material available, for that particular metal. So, coming back out of it, the Philippines won't be able to sort of turn it up another 25 or 30%. They were planning to do already because of the Indonesian ore ban. So, they're not going to be able to, fill it up too much. And the big issue for this fall, so I think we're going to trade sideways in nickel through till September, October here, is it's rainy season. You can't dig up dirt when your trucks just sink into the mud. So there's a 4-month period where Philippine ore exports drop off, and the same thing used to happen in Indonesia. And when both of them were there, they were a little bit off sync. So in terms of supply to China, across the entire year, it was relatively smooth. But now that Indonesia is out of the picture, the Philippines now needs to produce everything, not just for a 12-month period, but basic for everything for a 12-month period, and get it shipped out in 8. So the Chinese market is going to have 4 months where there's there aren't going to be a lot of ships coming from anywhere with ore supply. So that's going to create an interesting dynamic, kind of October, November, December, January. Next, this later in the year.
So, I mean, it's starting to get really interesting here because you've got Indonesia out of the picture. Get it? Okay, we've talked about that previously, and we'll put a link to that video in here. Philippines struggling. Rainy season is a big impact. I hadn't appreciated that. We've had a big supply disruption for the last 3 months or so. I'm trying to understand pricing. It has been a fairly erratic pricing. We've talked about super cycles, and we've talked about scrap impacting pricing, and now you've kind of got all of these sort of issues that we've just discussed. I mean, when's the nickel going to find its feet, or when is things going to settle down in terms of the supply into the market? The demand's there, but when are they going to be able to get control again?
No, I mean, nickel's always been volatile, and because you've got, and I think it's going to continue to be volatile. So, again, if you look back over, the last 12 months, so we first talked in September last year, it was 18,000, said, hey, that's not sustainable. Scrap and nickel pig iron production is going to take it down to 12 to 13. COVID took it down to 11 in February. We saw the market, because that supply from the Philippines came out, that really tightened up the market in China. So we started moving back up, say $12,000 a ton, relatively quickly. And we've, flirted with getting up to 13,000 in the last few weeks. But with the macro indicators in the March, April timeframe, that sucked a bunch of material into China. So you had people, export to finished nickel to China. So in China right now, everything's, stockpiles are starting to creep up again. Pricing's kind of come off a little bit. And so, that's why I think from now until October, the gap that sort of opened in March, April has now been filled up. And so, I think we're going to trade sideways here for 3 or 4 months. And the big question for next fall is going to be, okay, yes, Chinese NPI is reliant on this material coming from the Philippines, Indonesian NPI is ramping up. You've got a bunch of plants ramping up as expected, and you've got large amounts of nickel pig iron now coming from Indonesia to China. So that's going to be the key question in that October, November, December, January period is, okay, how much stronger is Chinese nickel and stainless demand growth going to be? Again, I think it's going to be, continue to be strong as China tries to, and the world tries to reflate its economy. Indonesian nickel pig iron will be strong. They're going to continue to push out as much as they can, out of Indonesia as these plants ramp up. And then it's going to be, how much ore is the Philippines actually going to be able to deliver in time, and build up stockpile. Again, you need to build up stockpile for that 4-month period. What's that going to look like? So it's going to be an interesting, 4-month period. And again, it's going to depend on the rains in the Philippines, the ramp up in Indonesia, and then sort of where global stainless demand is going to come out. I think it's going to be, we're going to be a net positive that by January, February, we're going to be up sort of 5 or 10% from here. But it's going to be the dynamic between those three key variables.
Okay, and there's also been an earthquake.
Yeah, no, things popped up a little bit last week or two because there was I think a magnitude 5 literally just off the coast of Sulawesi where there's a bunch of plants. I don't think there was any significant damage, but it, again, allowed the traders to squeeze out, a few more dollars per ton than they otherwise would.